So welcome to this 33rd Physics Matter event. So since December 2020. So this is a live event, a live forum, as you've seen, and it's organized by the Forum on International Physics, the FIP, at the American Physical Society, to celebrate physics for development. So our monthly events, they are recorded, and you can find all this material in our FIP webpage. So we are typically organizing those public colloquia on thematic related to the SESAME light source. So in Jordan, which gather 8 different member countries and many observer countries as well across the world. So like the successful stories of the SESAME light source, constructing and operating beyond the frontier and transcending borders, so this international and open source series want to shine today more light on similar initiatives. So last month, you have heard, so Professor Andrea Amadei, who introduced, who is the founding president of Engineers Without Borders, and he has been navigating us through the complexity across the peace, sustainability, climate, security nexus. So last September 22, so we heard also Professor Simon Connell, who explained the momentum growth as well for this ambitious project of the African light source. And this month, so we will travel through the Great Caribbean, so with Professor Leo Violini. So we introduce first the member of our panel. So we have with us, so Professor Andrea Lossi, who is the scientific director at the SESAME. So for the Forum of International Physics, so on our panel, so Johnny Mela will connect a bit later with the ICTP, but we have Alan Hurd from Los Alamos and Luisa Cifarelli, so who was organizing the startup as well of this event. And both of them, like me, so we have been in the share line of the Forum of International Physics. And I'm working at the European Spallation Source in Sweden, and I'm the chair elected of the FIP. We have also with us Sekasi Minkwinga, who is also joining from America, but he has been also involved largely with the African light source and the Caribbean project. So when we will have the possibility to discuss a bit later on, so we can have as well all our panelists interfering with your own question. So, but our guest of honor today is Professor Leo Violini, who has graduated from the University of Rome, which is now La Pienza. So he's a co-chair of the executive committee of the Greatest Caribbean Light Source Initiative. He's fellow of the APS and former member of large of the IPS, so like we have been each of us. He's a former professor of mathematical methods of physics at the University of Rome and in Calabria at the University of Los Andes. He is also the co-author of the book called Dispersion, Theory of High Energy Physics. He's co-founder and director of the International Physics Center of Bogota, and he received numerous prizes like the John Wesley Award with the APS, the Abdul Salam Spirit Award at the SCTP, the Outstanding Salvador Recognition from the government of El Salvador. He's also an honorary as well member of the Colombian Academy of Exact Physics and Natural Science. He's the former director of the European Union program for the Faculty of Science at the University of El Salvador, also former UNESCO representative to the Islamic Republic of Iran and director of the Tehran office. He is Dr. Honoris Causa of the Ricardo Palma University in Lima and consulting in different countries as well in the Great Caribbean area. So this is one of his numerous aspects. So together we want to create something which will bring a flow of ideas, so which is both educative and which is useful for your own community. So please prepare your question. You see that you have those little icons for question and answer. You can raise your hand as well. And at the end of the presentation, then we will get the possibility to interact with our panelists. But after this introduction, so I will leave the floor to Professor Violini to describe this exciting new initiative.
Okay, thank you very much, Christine, for your kind presentation. Here I find there's a lot of friends here, Andrea, Luisa, and Sekadi, so I feel myself at home. Actually, also, I feel myself at home also at FIP because I was member of the council many years ago of FIP, and I remember with sympathy with that period. A brief outline of my talk is this is with reference with connection to the slides. As you see, there will be only 35 slides, so it will not take more than 1 hour. You can be. It is rather safe. First of all, I think one should give a definition of what the Greater Caribbean it means. Basically, this means Central America and Caribbean countries. But for the purpose of what I'm going to comment today, I refer to this area, including Mexico, the country of the system of interregional system of Central America, which basically means the continental countries of Central America plus Dominican Republic, Colombia, and a bunch of islands which are spread over there. Most of them are very small, but there are at least 2 or 3 which have a very important university, which is the University of West Indies. Geographically, actually, it is more because countries facing to the Caribbean, having the shore on the Caribbean, are also Venezuela and Cuba, and moreover, there is Puerto Rico, with an associate state of the United States, and the 5 states of the United States. Texas, Louisiana, but a small piece of Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida. These countries, the Great Caribbean countries, I would like, first of all, give an idea of the economical and scientific situation of the countries. The economic matrix of the typical Great Caribbean countries is based on what? It's based basically on exploitation of natural resources and agriculture and tourism. The trade is mostly internal economies. There is a lot of activities related to services. They are important. The remittances of migrants for many countries, this may represent 20–25% of the gross domestic product, and technological goods are usually imported. So it is clear that in this mechanism, in this model, high technology industry almost does not exist. Nevertheless, it is very important to have one. I put in red exploitation of natural resources and agriculture because these are the 2 sectors which most benefit of the presence of a synchrotron, as I'm going to mention in a moment. If you want to have an idea of what this means in terms of economy, in billions of dollars, the GDP of this area is in the order of $6,000 billion. If one makes this per person, we are in the order of $8,000 per person. As you may see, in general, these economies tend to have a growth. They only had 2 moments which were very bad. The period of the economic crisis of 2008, and then recently the period of the pandemic. But after the pandemic, the trend here stops at 2021, but already in 2022 and 23, there was an improvement of the economical situation. I think that the first point which we should make is a comparison between the higher education in Latin America and the United States and what this means for science. From the point of view of universities were established in Latin America earlier than in what now is the United States. In fact, the first American university is that of Santo Domingo, which was established on the 28th of October of 1538. In Central America, the first one was that of Guatemala City, which started with a small college, the College of St. Thomas, in 562, but then became a university in 1676. This university is what is now the University San Carlos de Guatemala. Instead, only Harvard, which is the first university in the United States, was established almost 1 century after Santo Domingo. And if one go to Brazil, you may be astonished that the first university in Brazil was very close to the 19th century. It was the University of Engineering in Rio de Janeiro. However, there is a big difference. Well, there was a characteristics which really had an important influence for the future of science in that region. The universities in the Spanish colonies were established with strange mechanism of cooperation between the church and the kingdom. And this meant that in practice, they were only intended to form lawyers and clerics. Instead, the idea of teaching science there was some attempt at the end of the 18th century when, in correspondence to a movement which took place in the Spanish kingdom with Charles III, but really did not succeed very much. And one must wait the next century to see something really in science. But science for Yale meant to have a first course of chemistry already in 1804, whereas in Latin America during that century, there was only some engineering. There was, but not really a big effort in science. If one forgets the attempt of Argentina to bring Mossotti, an Italian physicist, to establish there the first laboratory of physics in the continent, in the subcontinent. But the situation changed in the 20th century, mostly in the second part of the 20th century. In the first one, there was something important because of the immigration to Latin America due to the anti-Semitic laws from the Nazi and fascist dictatorship in Germany, and well, not only in Germany, and in Italy, and of the Spanish Civil War. And there was an internal migration which had a result of expanding the movement, which was already effective in Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico. Well, the dictatorship in Argentina, Brazil, and Chile led to a development of science in other countries, like, for example, in Venezuela, Peru, Colombia, in the 70s. But the biggest difference in science between the two regions comes out if one looks at the expenditure in research and development. The average one in Latin America is 0.6% of the gross domestic product, but is a 0.6% which comes from average in Brazil with its 1.2%, Argentina about 0.5%, Mexico similar to Argentina 0.4%, and Guatemala, which is 0.4 per thousand. Whereas if you look at the investment in the United States, you find that it is 8 to 9 times more of that average. But also, I would say the political perception of the importance of science is not the same. In the United States, a very important moment was the report that Vannevar Bush sent to President Roosevelt in 1945, Science, the Endless Frontier, because this was really the first strong statement which brought United States government to take the development of science as a governmental function and not as something related to its university system. And then there was the space race of the 60s, which also contributed very much to strengthen the position of science in the country. And this had also an effect, an impact on education. You may, when we are all physicists, one can remember that these are the years in which there is the PSSC, which is a big attempt to develop physics teaching in a better way in the school. Instead, if one looks at Latin America, I already mentioned that the economic metrics does not pay much attention to science, but the development of science and investing in science meets two big difficulties. One is the fact that the opportunity cost is important because these countries often have very important economical and social problem. And also there's been very often a policy of fiscal austerity, which does not leave much space to science. If one wants to have an idea of this in the Central America and the Caribbean, this table, which is taken by the UNESCO report of 2021 on science, it makes you clear that the situation in science is slightly better in Mexico and Colombia, but certainly if one compares with the continental Central America or the Dominican Republic, where data are not available, the situation is very different. Well, which are the bottlenecks which make it so difficult to develop science in this region? Basically, one can identify two, well, perhaps three bottlenecks. One is the funding in science and technology. I already put some figure in the previous transparency, and one should add that also the percentage of the gross domestic product is not a very serious indicator to understand the situation, because most of these countries have a small population, and the income the per capita income is low. Therefore, when you take a certain percentage of the product of these two, you understand that this cannot allow important investment in big national scientific projects. There's no space for that. So a solution for that could be if one had regional programs and regional funding, but this really is not very developed, as I will show in the next transparency. Basically, the funding sources come from three possibilities. There is the national public financing, as everywhere, but this is little, as you have seen, and in particular is public, because the private is almost inexistent in most of these countries. International financing, which may come from different sources, including development banks. But the problem with international financing is that usually it is earmarked for some specific project in a specific areas. So it is very difficult to use this type of of financing to make structural intervention on the system. And then there is, of course, international cooperation. However, what is the drawback of international cooperation? That international cooperation in many countries is not seen as something which is complementary to what is already financed and is basically ensured independently of it, but on the contrary, is considered a sort of primary source. And moreover, one has a second problem, which is in certain cases, let's take, for example, the cooperation between Europe and Central America. It is true that European programs allow participation of Central America and Latin America, but very often this possibility is accompanied by constraints on the eligibility of the subject of research. I was mentioning a case in which there is a program of a regional program. Is the case of a fund which has been proposed for Central America at the regional level. The first suggestion goes back to the June 8 years ago, in a meeting of the Council of International University of the Public University of Central America. The advantage was that this idea, which was just brought in a scientific meeting, took advantage that Fuentes Soria, who was then the Secretary General of SUCA, became shortly after Vice President of SUCA, and as such, in this position, he could present the proposal to the meeting of integration system. So in general, the idea was well accepted, well received. In fact, already in the meeting in El Salvador in 2015, there was sympathy for the idea. The idea was to finance the fund with $25 million per year during 5 years. to do something, some activity which otherwise were not in the agenda of the countries of the region. However, in practice, after 8 years, it is still waiting for the approval of the heads of state. The second bottleneck is a general attitude of politicians toward the type of science which is useful. The idea is that it is very important that what is done has an immediate application. Of course, this may be traced back to the fact that politicians often worry for the next election, but certainly this is something which has been criticized already in '54 by the first Latin American Nobel Prize, who was a physician, Bernard Doucet. And then there's a third bottleneck, which to some extent is related to the previous one. Because the myth of the use of a science which is socially useful really is interpreted sometimes also in the sense that this must happen for each project which is financed. So a project which does not produce a result shortly is considered unsuccessful. And listen, this idea was considered crazy already 100 years ago. Émile Borel, the father of statistics, wrote an article in a journal which is not very well known now, but certainly Luisa will know this, is Scienza. It was a journal of Zanichelli, and he suggested that really when one looks at the return of the investment of science, one should look at the average of what of this happens, because a very successful project can be a justification for the financing of others which were not successful. And sometimes it happens that the projects are successful many years after. Well, one could quote now, the classical quote is Faraday, the sentence of Faraday saying that some minister will charge taxes for the result of his research. One could quote a very popular book in the last few years, The Usefulness of Useless, which by Nuccio Ordine. Nuccio Ordine received the prize Princess of Asturias this year. Unfortunately, he died 1 month ago. And the idea of Nuccio Ordine is mainly for the importance of useless for social sciences, for the culture, but it also applies to science. And in fact, I made an exercise of interpreting this in the sense of science. But you know, we have an example of results which are of science, which are important for the everyday life. Of course, the web was born for two different reasons: the military interest at the origin and the big development at CERN. Well, and then the web now determines a lot of the position of the current economy. Well, but there's another myth which is slightly related to this of useful science, is that of innovation. Often these countries speak very much of the importance that research is innovating. However, they forget two things. First of all, that innovation must be an innovation which corresponds to a situation in the country of a background in science and technology which is adequate. In fact, there is a point which the Nobel Prize David Gross used to stress, is a chain of impossibilities. Technology without a strong scientific technology transfer without a strong scientific background is impossible, and also a scientific strong background is impossible if you don't have a strong educational system. And one can add also that innovation without technology is impossible. Now, let's go now to the subject of what we are talking, the synchrotron, because I want just to give you a picture of the situation in Latin America. If one looks at this map, there are two things which are completely evident. In Africa, there are no synchrotrons. In Latin America, there is only one. Instead, if you look at Asia, you find that the number of synchrotrons in Asia is significant. In Europe, there are almost, I would say, one every 2 countries. In North America, if one goes northern of the river frontier between Mexico and the United States, there are several. In Canada, there is only one. This does not mean that in Latin America there are not large science infrastructure, but the large infrastructure in science in Latin America mainly are in astronomy and astrophysics for a series of reasons. The first one is the laboratory of Chacaltaya in Bolivia, which was established 8 years ago, and which was important because it was the place where the pion was discovered by Powell in collaboration with Blackett, Occhialini, and Lattes. Then there are certain laboratories in Chile, La Silla, which is the European observatory there, and there is Cerro Tololo, which is inter-American. But then there is the big Auger Observatory, which was proposed by Cronin and Watson at the end of last century and was established in Mendoza in Argentina. Originally, it was supposed to have a counterpart in the Northern Hemisphere, which never was presented. There was also an idea of having an observatory of this sort in Ecuador, on Ecuador. This was object of a presentation of a proposal in a meeting on a very high energy gamma rays at UNESCO around 93 or 94. And today there are also many projects which are important, and they are both open sky, like Orc in Puebla, or underground, Andes, the tunnel between Argentina and Chile. And against this, again, we have only one synchrotron. Nevertheless, synchrotrons are important and because of their versatility. I mean, since I'm talking to a group of physicists, I think there is no need that I give details of most of these applications. But as one can see, many of these applications have to do with areas which are not of physics. And this is an important point against having synchrotron, because when one talks about synchrotrons, the typical reaction is that this is a matter of physics. Perhaps the physics community is not able to take advantage of such a structure. Nevertheless, if one looks, for example, at the projects which are selected at Sirius in Brazil, those in biology are much more than those in physics. The situation in Latin America basically is only this bit of this synchrotron in Brazil. That synchrotron, the idea was proposed 40 years ago. Then there was a period of about 15 years in which there were discussions, and this led to the first synchrotron, which was an ultraviolet source in 97, and then this was the road by which Brazilians could be more ambitious, and around the middle of the year 2000, the year 10, around 2015 or so, they started to consider to have a more modern synchrotron, Sirius, and there's certain comments to make about Sirius. First of all, that it is one of the most modern synchrotrons in the world. Is one of the 3 synchrotrons of 4th generation. But second, that it has been built 86% with Brazilian technology. And this Brazilian technology could be developed only for one reason, because that had been the previous synchrotron in 97. In the period in which Brazilians were thinking about having a second synchrotron, a more advanced one, there were some proposals being discussed elsewhere in Latin America. In Colombia, Bernardo Lomes wrote an article in the Journal of the Colombian Academy of Science, suggesting that Colombia could have a synchrotron. Then in Mexico, there was a proposal which originally started in the state of Morelos. There was a feasibility study made by Victor Del Rio, and then the proposal failed in Morelos, but moved to another state, Hidalgo, and there was a big progress of this proposal. As a matter of fact, the Hidalgo state offered the land for the proposal, but the political situation there is very complicated. As a matter of fact, the elections which took place in Hidalgo for governor last year most probably have blocked the realization of the project in Hidalgo unless the new governor understands that it is a state project and not a party project, because there was a change of party in Hidalgo. Also in Cuba, it's been considered to have a synchrotron. The idea came when Obama visited Cuba in 2016, and a scientist from SLAC, Jeremy Rothstein, proposed to make a synchrotron there. There was a meeting there. It had the support of the grandson of Fidel Castro Smirnov, but then this idea did not succeed. Also because there's been a general, I would say, weakening of all things having to do with anything of elementary particle physics or nuclear physics in Cuba after the problem of Fukushima. This affected mainly the nuclear policies, but indirectly affected everything. In Puerto Rico, where there could be the conditions in principle to have a synchrotron, for the moment being that there's only an initiative of a beamline at Cornell. On this background, but we were not aware of this background, I must say. We were thinking mainly on the example of SESAME and about the idea of using the Brazilian synchrotron injector for elsewhere. And then we discovered that there were the other thing. We made another proposal, which is of a regional character. The group is a mixed group. There is a Castaño from Mexico, Fuentesoria, I already mentioned, from Guatemala. There is Gomez Ramirez, is a former vice minister of the Dominican Republic, is a physicist. Gregorio Medrano from Spain. Eduardo Posada is the Spanish, the Colombian colleague with whom I founded CIF 40 years ago. And Carlos Ludamas from El Salvador. It was important to have a regional group because, in my view, a posteriori, the weakness of the two projects, of the two proposals I was mentioning, three if we include Cuba, is that it is very difficult to have a synchrotron at the national level in Latin America, except then in a country like Brazil and perhaps Argentina, because of the social problem, economical problem, and so on. Of course, there is a question you may ask me, but does it exist in the region a human capacity which makes sense, which gives sense to such a proposal? Well, we must distinguish two aspects. From the point of view of potential users, I'm completely sure that a scientific community can take advantage of a synchrotron in the region. In fact, especially in areas like biodiversity, health, food safety, the problem of water, soil, there is a lot of good research carried on in this area. So these people simply don't use synchrotron because the closest synchrotron is at a distance of 5,000 kilometers. And therefore, they use other techniques which are not synchrotron techniques. But certainly, if a synchrotron is available, they could really easily move to use the new technique. And moreover, the synchrotron in the Caribbean does not exclude the participation of from outside the region. On this sense, for example, it is clear the position of Sirius. Harry Westphal, the director of Sirius, strongly supports the idea of having a synchrotron and even more than one synchrotron additional to Sirius, because it would be complementary to what they do in Sirius, and I'll return to this point later. Instead, it is true that for concerned engineers, staff, and technicians of the future synchrotron, the experience is very limited. There are certain people who train themselves at synchrotron. In Colombia, at Los Andes, there is one person who comes from DESI, Bernardo Gomez, another one who comes from CERN. So there are people who have experience of accelerator, but they are really a minority. So these people must be trained. However, in the case of SESAME, what happened was the following, that when SESAME was decided, then in the next 4 or 5 years needed to establish the synchrotron in Jordan, there was a strong effort, a big effort at the regional level to train staff and technicians. And SESAME now has the staff and technicians. Well, Laos is there, he is a witness of what I'm saying, who were trained by this procedure. So, on the other hand, for certain aspects like the civil engineering, the problem is not a serious problem. So this means that the training is certainly a must if we want to go on with our proposal. And but this training really is really urgent, mainly for what concerns this aspect of the staff and future technician. Instead, for what concerns the users, we can think also to make a regional program of training, which incidentally can be done also sharing the activity with the African light source. This can be done through LAMP. I'm happy that Sekazi is also listening to this presentation, and certainly can make comment on that. And this could give origin to a South-South cooperation in SESAME and Sirius. There would be the possible cooperation of SCTP. And then, of course, there is the possibility of North-South cooperation through Electra in Trieste, the American synchrotrons. I gave it 2 talks in the Slack and Berkeley 3 months ago, 4 months ago, and availability for this exists. There are European synchrotrons, the ALBA in Spain. There is the possibility of Mars 4. And in Sweden, besides Mars 4, there is a program of training, Prismas, which can be a model of how one can do these things. But also, I must say, it's not only a problem of giving, making the regional program of training. One can think also to some experience, inviting people from the region to participate in some activity at Beamline. Of course, if you think in a project or in a proposal at Beamline, probably only Mexico in the region is in condition now to present a proposal of using the Beamline with the project originated in the region. However, one could also think that some Beamline could receive some scientists as part of that regional program I was mentioning. Additionally, one can also think to establish in the country some small accelerator, which can be useful for many purposes. Okay, so let's now look to discuss a number of problems which are more specific. One is the cost and the financing. The cost of a synchrotron is can be estimated between $1 and $2 billion US if one also includes the activity over 20 years. However, I must say that this includes as an important element, an important item, the cost of energy. And the SESAME example shows that if one takes advantage of solar energy, the cost of energy can go down in a significant way. And the area, the Caribbean, is an area in which the possibility of taking advantage of solar energy is, of course, obvious. I think this figure should be analyzed when one makes a feasibility study. The financing should come first, certainly from the participating country. This is no doubt. But I would say that even the upper limit of 2 billion is not out of question for the countries. And moreover, I want to say that international support can be considered from development banks or for international cooperation. For the mechanism of financing, one can think about the mechanism of CERN, so a country contribution based on the gross domestic product, or one could think on a private initiative, like it is the case of the Grenoble synchrotron, which is a consortium, a private consortium. The location is not really a very important problem in this moment. When SESAME was established, I remember I participated in one of the first meetings of SESAME, the one which took place in Yerevan. At that moment, it was still unknown if the SESAME would be located in Jordan, in Armenia, or in another country. And nevertheless, the certain decisions were taken without knowing where the synchrotron would be located. Anyway, we can imagine three or four main possibilities. There are no more. Mexico could be a possibility because existing plans, because of the existence of land already given to the Hidalgo proposal. But it is politically complicated because of the federal structure, which, even if it allows local decision, requires that the local decision fits with the federal position of the government. And in this moment, Mexico is waiting for the presidential election next year. So at least for 1 year, it is unlikely that we have a strong commitment from Mexico. The situation from this point of view could be different in Colombia because the present government elected just this year is supportive of science, and also there's a law on the royalties which could allow to make important investment in science. Dominican Republic, there was an idea presented by the current president, at the beginning of his presidential period, February 21, of establishing a city of knowledge. In a city of knowledge, a synchrotron could find place, no doubt. But the fact that nothing happened for 3 years means that in this moment, probably this is not very likely, even if some conversation I had, for example, with the chair of the Climate Council and with the Minister of Energy, they seem to indicate that such a possibility could be considered. And then, of course, there is Central America. What else elsewhere? The problem is not trivial. First of all, the synchrotron should be located in the Great Caribbean. But this does not mean that it will be only for the Greater Caribbean. Should be a Latin American synchrotron. So we should consider that if the synchrotron is in any of the countries I was mentioning, there could be some problem in a joint financing with other countries. And so it may be opportune to establish in other countries some complementary facility, not only as an option to train people in intermediate time, but also as a part of a regional system of small accelerator. Of course, there are two possibilities for this. One is that it is a national institution, or that it is located as part of the unique institution to which belongs the synchrotron. And in my view, it is very important that it is part of a regional lab, because it would make it less dependent of the political changes which may occur in the country. And this, anyway, this may be a delicate point in the negotiation. About the time, I already mentioned the time which took the Brazilian case. SESAME took more or less the same time because there was about well, not 10 years, but something like that, between the initial of the idea of SESAME and starting of operation. There were about 17, 18 years, even 20 perhaps. In the case of the African light source, the first idea was in the 90s, but the first interim steering committee was only in 2015. Nevertheless, it is true that this accelerated the process because the first governmental formal declaration of support is of 4 years ago of the Ghana president, and this triggered other support, other commitment by Benin, South Africa, Nigeria, and Ivory Coast. So let's say we may hope that by the 30s we can, if everything goes well, we could hope to have the synchrotron in the Caribbean. An obvious question is which kind of synchrotron. I already say that the technological developments that have made a change in the synchrotrons, which has been accelerated in the last in last years. In fact, now in practice, it would be nonsense to think of having a synchrotron which is not fourth generation. In SESAME case, there was the idea of when Bessie 1 injector was taken to make a second generation synchrotron, and then eventually it was a third generation synchrotron. Currently, there are only 3 fourth generation synchrotron, Lund, Grenoble, and Campinas. But nevertheless, the upgrading of many synchrotrons is taking place. It is clear that when the synchrotron in the Caribbean will be operative, if it will be operative, it will be necessary to have a fourth generation synchrotron. And now, since Sirius is a 3 GeV synchrotron, it might be reasonable or wise or sound to think that a 1.5 GeV synchrotron could be a reasonable choice in our case. Of course, one can also be more ambitious and think that, as in Lund, one could think to have a 1.5 and a 3 GeV synchrotron at the same time, but it depends very much on what the countries will understand about that. Well, what are the expected results of our proposal? Well, we expect development in many different areas. Certainly scientific. There will be a development of the scientific community, integration of different groups from different areas. And well, of course, you can read what I believe are the important scientific development of this. Then there is also the idea of a technological and industrial development. The case of Sirius of Brazil is important. I pointed out the importance of a high technology industrialization of the region. And most probably, even the idea of going to build a synchrotron could already bring some industry there. For example, so let's make just as an hypothesis, a working hypothesis. Suppose that it is the City of Knowledge in Dominican Republic. In the City of Knowledge, one of the main aims of City of Knowledge is to attract venture capitals, to attract new industries. And so therefore one could think that in the City of Knowledge could take place also industries that for some reason would be related to the future synchrotron. But really the most important thing is that the application in areas like medicine, like food safety, pharmaceuticals, and soil analysis and so would contribute to social and economical development. This is a must to justify the investment in countries like those of the Caribbean. And in some sense related to this is the academic development. You know, I did not mention here the data about the situation of doctorates in the Caribbean, but you may remember the transparencies I put at the beginning on the doctorates. The situation in continental Central America and Dominican Republic is not comparable to that of Colombia and Mexico. So the idea of having a big infrastructure could contribute to develop also a program of PhD and so on. And then there is the political development, and this should be considered from many different points of view, but the main one is the regional integration. This area is an area in which there was the very beginning of regional integration in the world, even before Europe, and was triggered by science. Then the political situation in the next years made very complicated and more political integration, but certain integration is a must. And if one considers that even in this world in which now globalization is becoming less global, but still the importance of having integration of small countries is a crucial point if one wants that these countries are not just the colonies of the big countries. Some word about the connection with similar projects. Well, the project to which we are closer is the African Light Source. A link with it has been established with LAM. As a matter of fact, I did not say that, but our regional project, in a sense, has been able to find some strong collaboration with the previous Mexican origin. And in fact, now it is just one can talk of just a unique project in the Caribbean, which has absorbed is not the right word, which has matched with the Mexican project. And this is for us a big advantage because of their experience, but also with African Light Source. In fact, we presented jointly the two projects in the last year World Science Forum in Cape Town. And we foresee another joint presentation at the United Nations and the Science Summit of United Nations General Assembly 78, so that this is important. But the fact that we can join with the African Light Source has an important consequence, that we can advocate for a joint international support. And this may be a case for UNESCO and can be a case also for American agencies. There's also another project to which we try to join is the Balkan project in Montenegro, but this project is really in a much weaker situation than the African Light Source. But perhaps the success of us and the Africans could make a revival of the Balkan project. And then one must also say that in many of the things, one can think about interregional cooperation. This may be important in training, in long-term research and so. For example, if we have a training which is for African and Caribbean, that training could also receive people from certain countries from Maghreb who eventually can decide to work at SESAME, but for SESAME could be not economical to have a specific training. And for this reason, just last week I was in Tunis, where I presented these ideas in the Center of Science of Nuclear and Technological, Nuclear Science and Technologies, which is a center which has a small accelerator, but very small. Well, at this point, there is a crucial question, which is, of course, the question behind the problems which from time to time I've been mentioning. Okay, perhaps I've convinced you that the project is feasible, but does feasibility justify the financial commitment for it? And this justification can be understood by politicians and by the civil society. Well, it is the basic problem is the cost of opportunity. I was mentioning this at the beginning. The social and educational problem in the region are very important. However, let's give this for granted. Okay, this is a cost of opportunity. But nevertheless, if one does not push scientific education and scientific development, this also causes indirect costs. So if one prefers to have the cost indirectly in order to avoid the investment, is a matter of political choice, but is a political choice which is not far-looking. And also there are certain problems for which a synchrotron can be extremely useful, which are of tremendous social relevance. In this region, natural risk is very important. You know, in this moment, until November, it will be the epoch of tornado in the Caribbean. And the environment is a big problem, and this is also for us in Europe. As a matter of fact, I'm in Rome now, and I feel not very comfortable because of the temperature, and I'm in a rather shadow situation. Well, food security. Food security is absolutely a primary problem in this region. The contamination of water. Many of these countries have mines, and mines contribute to contamination in a very important way. Agriculture. The importance of having a modern agriculture makes part of the economic matrix of these countries. Health. Health, there is a very simple comment I could make, that perhaps a better biotechnology could develop very much these countries in the recent pandemic. And also, from the political point of relevance, I would like to add that the biodiversity, which indirectly is linked to the previous argument, is also a subject of tremendous political relevance for the government. Therefore, reason to finance this can be found. But also, this for concern the government, but let's concern the people. I think, I remember that when I was in Colombia, we made a study to justify, we made several studies to justify the participation of Colombia to high energy physics, for example. And this was, the main point was that it was defending the right of the people to develop their capacity. And this was feasible. In fact, this was a complicated problem. Then there were many initiatives. There was the initiative of CERN with the LN program, which was very important. So, but now, for example, Colombia participates in all LHC experiments. So that really, it is important that people can find a way to develop what they want to develop and so on. And then again, I will repeat the international integration. So to the question, I can give you two types of answer. One is the easy answer. That an easy answer which a politician was far-looking, like a Dominican one. He was candidate to the president of the Republic, Jose Francisco Peña Gómez, probably in a moment in which it was still premature to have a president who was with this color scheme. But anyway, Peña Gómez was a very important politician in the Dominican Republic, and he said very clearly, citizens have an individual right to develop, and this must be recognized as a fundamental factor for the transformation of a nation. But then again, Bernard Doucet, I'm not going to quote all the quotation of Bernard Doucet, but I would call your attention to the last part of it. Rich countries are rich because they devote money to scientific and technological development. Poor countries remain so if they don't do so. Science is not expensive. Ignorance is expensive. But these are the easy answers. But there are also other answers which I would like to make, even if I know that they are not so easy, because one could say, yes, but these things have a justification which is stronger than science. Let's do health. In health, during the pandemic, the Development Bank for Central America gave 400 million to the 8 countries which are the countries of its competence. 50 million each country. Now, 50 million each country means that with this, that was possible just for an emergency. Now, for a one-shot investment of importance for 20 years, could not, for example, be given a similar amount of money? This would allow to construct the synchrotron, and since the synchrotron is built in 5 years, would mean only 1 million per year. In education is a tremendous problem for many of these countries, and because education means the problem of inclusion, the problem of gender, but also the inclusion, which is the inclusion of the peripheric areas of the country. But this argument is not used of cost of opportunity, because if you look at the average investment for education, it is 4.6% of the gross domestic product, and there the fluctuation between countries are not as strong as for science. In science, I told you there was a variation between 1.5 and 0.04. In education, the variation is between 5 and 3, more or less, but with an average of 4.6. But then look at military expenditure. Okay, I know that the armies are important. I know that Mexico and Colombia have an important problem with narco traffic, and so with the, I mean, this thing I know. Nevertheless, in 2021, in the Great Caribbean, the investment was $21 billion. $21 billion, of which the countries which are not Mexico and Colombia contributed with 10%. Okay, looking at these figures, I would say that an increase of the investment in science is not out of question. Now, to conclude, let me talk about the United States. The cooperation is important, and this offers an opportunity for the United States. The United States played a major role with LAC for the Brazilian synchrotron project. And again for SESAME, in which Herman Winnick, the honorary chair of our executive committee, was fundamental. But it is true that the two cases of Brazil and SESAME were two different cases, because in the case of SESAME, when her House resolution was approved, it was clear that the problem, the political problem of Middle East was really present to everybody. I mean, the idea of proposing something in Middle East has a lot of elements to be considered which favor it. But SESAME also for this reason benefited from CERN and UNESCO support. We had some discussion with CERN about the possibility of having a similar support about our project. We had an interview of the colleagues from CERN in the external relation sector of CERN. They consider that CERN cannot play in this moment with UNESCO the same favor, cannot support UNESCO in the same way which he did with CERN, but still they looked with some interest to our project, and they also they looked with interest to the project of it. But the situation in UNESCO could change, and I will comment this in a moment. But let me make a comment. In this moment, science diplomacy tells us that for United States, Latin America and Africa are strategically important, even more than could be Middle East in that moment. This in part is due to what happened during the pandemic, because you know that in the vaccines use issue, what happened was not especially favoring the good relation between United States and Europe and most of Latin America and most of Africa. So this is, but also there are several geopolitical reasons which are known to everybody. There's not needed that I give details on this, which make Latin America and Africa two regions which in this moment are very important for United States. So this could give an opportunity for this type of support. Which would be the form of support for this support? First of all, direct scientific support through a consortium of institutions. Universities can play a major role. However, we must be conscious that many universities have by themselves important Latin American programs, and so they might prefer a program of themselves than a joint program. So there might be conflicting interests. This I'm aware. But then the big accelerator could make something jointly. We started some discussion. I mentioned already my talks in Stanford and Berkeley. We had some discussion with Cornell. And I would say there are many possibilities open in this sense. And then, of course, I'm talking now to APS. APS has a tradition of promotion, and FIP in particular, of strengthening of science in developing countries. But then there's the political support. This time, I'm not going to discuss, most of you are American, you know perfectly well if it is more easier through the Department of Energy, NSF, or not. I'm not going to. Each of these agencies at individual level is unlikely that will contribute. But if there is a Latin American focused program, I think that these agencies are agencies which could do that. A Marshall Plan for Central America during the pandemic has been advocated for by the Hispanic lawmakers. Nothing happens. And the main focus was on social problems. But social problems can be faced in a permanent way, in a stable way, and not just putting patches only if one faces the reasons which are behind them. And then this can be done through United Nations. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, United States rejoined UNESCO. And they agreed to contribute to UNESCO every year $150 million for their years. And this has a clear intersection with that mentioned direct support. Then there are also other possible forms of cooperation on which perhaps there is no point that I give more details. I just mentioned that the European Union has an agreement with Central America, which is just to say how this is ridiculous. In 7 years, this agreement is there because it has been ratified by all countries except Belgium, in which there are 2 ratifications missing. Anyway, sooner or later it will be ratified. And this could come in form of matching funds. I mean, suppose that one has the knowledge of possible matching funds, then also the commitment from the countries can be easier. Okay, now to conclude, here is a short description of what we have done. Well, it's a long list. I would just call to you the attention to a multi-venue symposium organized 1 month ago, which was run in 6 different countries. I think this is a first in this story. Perhaps, I don't know if it is a Guinness or not, but a symposium in 6 countries in 6 days, I think could have ambitions to be in the Guinness, because I think that there have not been any until now. And then what they are thinking now, here again, I'm not going to insist on everything. I just call your attention on 2 things. We hope that we, in some way, will be able to reach a UNESCO resolution supporting jointly our project and the African one, just as it was done for SESAME. And we are looking forward to what may come out of the Science Summit at UNGA 78 next September. Now, I would like to end with thanking, first of all, my thanks to all my colleagues of the working group and of the interim executive committee. I should also add to people like Andrea, who is present, who has assisted us very much in many circumstances. But I would like to conclude thanking 2 more people for their teaching and support because without them, I would never take the involvement in science policy, which made it possible for me to be here today. And they've been my science policy mentors. Eduardo Mardi was my professor in law and supported me very much when I founded the center in Colombia. And Abdul Salam also supported very much the center in Colombia. And really, I cannot end this without thanking them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will not say it in all those languages, but I think you had the very good language to convince that there is really the need of such a light source as well in this part of the world. So we will have a bit of time for more questions. So maybe first I will invite my colleague from the panelists as well to connect and prepare the question. I will show, for instance, and potentially we had, I think, from
Excuse
the
me, I had the problem with my mobile, so I see that I ended at 5:15. So it was 1 hour 15. I'm sorry. I hope it was less.
If you can stop sharing, then it will be easier for us as well.
I should share. I share in the rain.
Stop sharing.
Stop sharing.
Stop sharing.
Exactly. And that way we will all the panelists.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. So we can start some few questions. We have as well from the audience a nice comment as well from Michael Delgado. So maybe I would invite the panelists to read this and potentially to bring as well to the attention so those aspects of how is the user community, crystallography and all those aspects. Now we have a question from Sekazi, and I think this is also the perfect way to start with this panelist and question, and then with Luisa. Sekazi then.
Yes, I wanted to respond to that particular comment. We do realize that you have to have local infrastructures in place in order to be able to make the full utilization of a big synchrotron facility. That is, in fact, why we have initiatives going on locally. For the African Light Source, we've been building laser and crystallography training programs across the country. One, I will put the website in the chat in a second, called X-Tech Lab. It was one of the projects that came out of the LAMP program in conjunction with the government of Benin, where we bring students in from various African countries to train on single and now powder diffractometers, as well as tomographs and so forth. In the Caribbean, we have an initiative with the University of the West Indies Mona campus, which is located in Jamaica. There is a Professor Marvadine Singh Wilmot, who is trying to purchase diffractometry equipment. And LAMP has been working very closely with her, and we are just close to bringing, and I think within the next few months, we will have diffractometry equipment coming to that campus. So that's a good point, but I think we have to tackle all of these problems simultaneously. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So I guess it really answered very well. And we have, I think, from Michael, indeed, the point from also how to maybe get the stage approach from where the urgency is. And one of those scientific cases that Leo as well has emphasized was the environmental aspect. And I think, indeed, this is really important and potentially as well good complementarity with the work ongoing with the CIRRUS. So indeed, to try to look at the different thematic and to try to make sure that the community is prepared. So Luisa, you have a question as well. Sorry.
No, I just have a comment. Among all the political aspects, there are also the scientific aspects to motivate such an enterprise. And I think one could also include in this particular side of the world research is related to paleoanthropology, anthropology, archaeology, archaeozoology, these things you didn't mention, but I think they could be included in the portfolio of all the advantages that such a facility could provide at large for humankind, for investigation. Of course, there's a large, I mean, I remember when I was many years ago in a NATO panel for trying and give the first internet connections to the countries after the fall of the Berlin Wall on the, let's say, former Soviet Union side. And the major problem was that the people were used to deal with point-to-point connections, internet and all that, and between DAISY, CERN, and all these big laboratories. And in Russia, for instance, and all related countries, they only had faxes. So clearly there is a gap in between you want a big facility or performing a modern facility, and you have to face a situation where the equipment is really poor. But nevertheless, I think it's an important step that would really give a lot of impetus to modernization and a boost of everything in the countries you mentioned. So I am definitely in favor, of course. I mean, this is not enough, but I think the support is there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, this is important comment. So maybe as well from Alan, so you had also questions beyond this return on investment as well.
Yeah, in fact, on the investment side, it does seem that by now we've had new technologies come forth to lower the cost of beamlines and facilities. And in particular, I wonder, Leo, if you've considered a compact X-ray source, such as a free electron laser. Some of the exciting developments, possibly disruptive developments, are under investigation now, and Arizona State University probably has the most interesting project, I think, at this time.
Andrea.
And this would be part of the stage approach. And it first.
In fact, let's listen to Andrea, and then I comment everything.
Okay.
Okay. So I just wanted to put the accent on the training of the users, because what will happen is what has happened also in Italy, in Spain. It is with the onset of the synchrotron, then the community is born. So there was no community, or almost no community, for synchrotron radiation in countries where there is no synchrotron radiation source. And then this gains momentum. So much energy has to be dedicated, has been dedicated in SESAME to the training of the technicians and the engineers and the scientists of SESAME. But now what we are doing is to concentrate essentially on the training and facilitating for the users. And I was wondering, in this respect, did you ever think of a beamline from the Caribbean in Sirius to start with a path which can then bring the users of the region to familiarize with the techniques of the synchrotron?
Well, perhaps I can try to make some comment now on this first comments I listened to. But concerning the fact that there is the experience Sekazi was mentioning in West Indies, and this also answers indirectly to a comment I read on the chat. I think that it is true that certainly there is a group on crystallography. Let me put this way. it is clear that we have to build this from scratch in many regions, except Mexico, where there is a community which is broad enough for the use of a synchrotron. The rest of the community must be built in two ways. There are the areas in which they do something similar, but they don't know that a synchrotron can be used. And then there is the need of those which have no idea of this. The community exists. I'm not so pessimistic about this, but we must make a work of training them, and so that's absolutely clear. Now, concerning the comment of Alan about free electron laser or other possible instrument, the type of instruments different from a synchrotron, it is certainly possibilities. So, and in fact, in many discussions we have among us, it is clear that this idea comes. For example, there's also another idea which often is presented is a small accelerator which can do only a certain, which can do just a specific thing. The point is the point is this certainly thing which will be discussed in the future. In my view, in this moment, frankly speaking, the real problem we are facing, and Sekazi, I think, as a co-chair of the group, I hope we agree with me, is the fact that we need very much to have a strong commitment of some country that this type of initiative can be carried out. So we are making the case for having this initiative. Now, if we get that, at that moment, we are not making any religion war. So if in this discussion we find that instead of the synchrotron, maybe another thing which goes in the same direction we have in mind, scientific development of a regional community, we would certainly do it. We would not say, no, yes, this, no. But so the only thing we would like to say is that we don't want to put the argument of a small accelerator as alternative to the idea of a synchrotron. They can be discussed, but it's not a low-level alternative, because otherwise we will have a big infrastructure in 50 years from now. This is, in my view, the point. Concerning the point made by Luisa, you see, Luisa, if in fact, in the list of the many applications I was putting at the beginning of the versatility of synchrotrons, many of those you are mentioning were listed indeed. And in fact, these are the arguments we used to convince people that the synchrotrons is not a toy for physicists. It's a toy that only physicists could have imagined how to do. But then it's for other people. So this concerning the training, the possibility of using SESAME for training, yes, this I knew, and I agree. I don't know if there's anything left. Perhaps also I've seen among the participants there was some comments. I would like to make one comment about the participant, because I've seen among the participants a dear friend whom I don't meet since 12 years, Jorge Colon, from Puerto Rico, and I remember that I shared with him an initiative after the earthquake in Haiti, and so I'm pleased to see that he's there, and welcome to this meeting. And I think that Puerto Rico can play a major role for this type of initiative in the region.
And sorry for the bad spelling as well. So indeed, so I copied as well the very nice comment that so your colleague as well was giving, and I guess that this is important as well for the region. So thank you for those comments. And indeed, the stage approach, the aspect, maybe one of the things we could look at as well is this the ecosystem, looking at the industries as well. The academic is very important, and Sekazi has mentioned the training aspect and this possibility as well to enhance as well the American connection and maybe as well with South America training. But what about from the industrial point of view? Because we know that for the case of Sirius, that was one of the big factors as well to help. We know for the case of the African light source, it's one of the challenge. So what do you feel are the chance as well to enhance as well this aspect of industrialization with all those components that will be essential as well for a large scale, maybe more than for a compact accelerator, but for a large scale, it might be as well taking time to establish the missing industry or to fulfill this gap.
Listen, no, Christine, let me be honest. 2 years, I was born as a particle physicist. I made many things in science policy in my life. I'm not a person of accelerator. So this type of questions, you understand, I prefer that the answer come from people who are really having a long experience in accelerators and so that in this moment, my main worry is that we keep our group compact enough to obtain the result of having such a type of structure of infrastructure. For the details, I think we will have many experts, much more experts than me, that can discuss an initiative, see if a certain solution is better or not. My opinion really on this is an opinion of a person who does not know enough to give a meaningful answer.
Thank you. And coming from the field of accélérateur, so I guess...
Je ne suis pas dessus cette réponse, mais franchement, c'est la seule réponse honnête que je peux donner.
And this is the important aspect, a honest approach, so that it could be a way. But then with this, and this is important to have fact, because like for the case of Africa, we saw for the training for accelerator aspect, this is where we need to put also more focus.
No.
So same way, you see, we can get...
No, listen, I'll tell you, I think that there is, for the training, I think that we have a certain mechanism which we can put on the table. One is, in Mexico, there is a rather strong community already existing. So we could make, for the training, we could take advantage of the Mexican group. The Mexican group could take, I think, one training which we can think about is the fact that some people, young people, may go, may make part of some experiment or some activity at some synchrotron. For example, in Dominican Republic, when there is a girl, a lady who has been, has worked at Elettra, made her thesis at Elettra with the University of Padua. That we have small elements which can be used for training, but we have to train people from really in a situation in which they know very little about that, so that in a sense, on one hand, we have many possibilities. On the other hand, we have still a basin of potential users, which is big, but we should also attract that basin because they don't know that we look at them. This is the point. So this is one of the parts of our job, is to make advertising that this can work. Mr. Kazi, you want to say something?
Yes, I wanted to just follow up on training. I put a web link in the chat for people to spread the word to apply to the LAMP project for training, because we send a faculty, and that faculty graduate student to light sources for 2 months, and they have the possibility of going back the following year for 2 months. And I see online one of our current LAMP trainees is Professor Graciela Diaz-Delgado, who this is her 2nd year of going. And so this is a very important program, so please spread the word. I also put a brochure a website to a brochure that LAMP publishes. If you could, disseminate that among your students and friends. It's written for the public, so it's not a very technical brochure.
I would like to make a comment about what you just say about the presence of Graciela, because Graciela, for example, can play an important role because she's member of the International Science Council. In a sense, we must build around this project a consensus. And in my view, the main problem today is not that of details. It's not the problem of where, it's not the problem of the energy, it's not the problem of when we carry on the first workshop of training. In this moment, what is essential for our project to survive, in my view, is that we should obtain as soon as possible some political endorsement of some country. This is crucial. And for this we should fight, because once we have that, the rest will be done. We have a certain group of potential users to which we can refer. But we really, in this moment, where we are weaker is in the fact that whereas in Africa there are 5 countries, yes, 5 countries that have declared their interest in the project. In Latin America, we had in this symposium in 6 countries, we had some declaration made by the lady who came in representation of Ministry of Science of Colombia, was positive. We had some comment of the people related to the Vice President of El Salvador, which was positive. All of this is true, but we still don't have a president who says, I want to do that, or the Vice President, or the Prime Minister, or so. So this is what we must have. And for this, we also must look. There's one point on which I think I made some comment in a recent talk I gave on a different subject. One crucial point is the point of the people, of journalists. We need some journalists who starts saying that these things are useful. In Dominican, we are almost at it, because in Dominican, there was, after the symposium we organized, there was a well-known physician. He's one of the experts in diabetes of the Dominican Republic, who wrote an article, one-page article in the main Dominican newspaper, saying the importance for medicine of the synchrotron. These type of things are important, because but tonight we'll have another meeting with the research committee. I hope that some of your doubts, your suggestions will be referred to by Sekasi and me there, and we will have more answers already tomorrow.
So it means that you have in your roadmap already launch this campaign to obtain as many letters of intent as well as possible, and you already have.
You want to see the roadmap?
Exactly.
To see the roadmap, I should put again. Let me see how can. No, listen.
And
in the roadmap, I can tell you the main things. The main thing we have are 2 things, because the other things are details. One is to have a UNESCO resolution supporting jointly the African light source and the Latin American light source, the Great Caribbean light source. For this, some contact has been made by one of us, by Victor Del Rio at UNESCO, and I think this is one of the things on which we should put pressure. it is not so easy, but this can be done. In my view, probably with the development of this idea, we could also hope that CERN position becomes stronger than the one we perceived in our meeting with them a couple of months ago. And the second goal is a meeting which will take place during the General Assembly of United Nations in September. In that meeting, there is a science summit in which there are several initiatives carried on. And we are planning to have an initiative, a session of 12 contributions. Some of us will be there also because it will be presential, at least with 5-6 people. But for example, this creates a first problem. For the moment being, our first problem probably is to have a minimum funding, because until now, all this has been done with zero funds. So, I mean, if I say, from the point of view of the zero fund we invested in it, our results are spectacular, obviously. But in order to go on, we now need to have some way of doing this with minimum funding. And so for this, we are fighting.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
I would like to make another comment that if we compare anyway, if we take the 21 day, the day in which we wrote the article in Archive, the article which was not accepted for publication by a journal of science policy because they say there was not interesting enough. So we left it in Archive and did not publish. Worse for them. But anyway, since then, I think if we look at the fact that we are less than 2 years from then, I think that what we have done until now is rather satisfactory. On this, I think we can be rather satisfied.
Yeah, indeed. So thanks a lot for those comments. I also invite everyone to read the comment as well that were in the chat. So from George Colon, and I think it's important.
Can I ask you one thing, Christine? Since after that, the chat will not be available.
Yeah, I can save it. This is exactly what I was thinking, because I saw that in the chat we had very important aspects. So what I would propose to do is to add them in our webpage. We have additional information. So then I will.
For me, I'm not so good for this. Can one of you do the same and send it to me after that? Because my familiarity with the digital system is well, I could be
all complementary.
I could be the father of all of you. So
it's already done, and I will send it to you. But if then you agree, then we could put it public as well on our website.
No, of course, no. Once I receive the comment by chat, not only I will read them, but also if you can send me also the email address of the participants, because they must have given one.
We might not be able to. I will see the limit that we have with the GDPA and with the APS, but I will do as much as possible, and we will look at additional information, and also to invite everyone listening from the audience.
Perhaps I don't know if my email address has been. I can put in the chat my email address.
I will add it as well on the webpage, so no worry. So everyone will be able to contact and form as well some synergy, because you had some important point that was rising a lot of interest, as we saw. And indeed, I'm thinking indeed from certain point of view, but as well in America, maybe Fermilab or elsewhere. So from the audience, that there was a nice audience also from America. So thanks a lot for all of that. Unfortunately, the time is running, and we'll have to share to give the channel back. So I will need to to introduce the next presentation next month, which will make us travel to China. So this is also a very important aspect. we were speaking about sustainability. So we looked at how those accelerator-driven systems can be a solution for multi-problem of the society. One of them is the big aspect of environmental aspect, and this is going to be a full and an overall review of those accelerator-driven systems, but by Professor Han Xing from the Chinese Academy of Science. So a very exciting talk. So from China, live. So that's a very important aspect as well of this Physics Matter, where we try to reach community, developed and developing community. So this is with those capacity as well that we have the possibility to improve as well our common world. So that will be better and better, hopefully. And so now we have to give the channel back. So we thank you again. So all the participants, so our panelists, and especially so Leo Violini. So thanks a lot for all your insight into that. So also with Andrea, I think there is a lot of important common ground that we see as well evolving. So thanks to the SESAME success story. And one of the aspects as well, all the solar panels. So this is also a very good, and the unicity as well of research infrastructure fully powered by that. So thanks for this model, for being a role model for the new research infrastructure. Electron, unfortunately, we cannot do that for the neutron nor the proton, but that's a good start. We'll try to put some additional thing for the proton side, for the ESS, at least we'll try. So Sekasi, you had a hand left, and
no, I made a mistake. No, I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry.
That was waving. So thank you, everyone, and we will close then on those positive ways.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.